Hello, my name's Dr. Julie Blanchard-Emmerson, and I'm here to present to you today Materialising Identities, Preteen Girls Negotiating Femininity, Family and the Future Through Fashion. This talk is based on the work that I did for my doctorate, and my thesis was called Feeling Your Age, Preteen Fashionable Femininity. It was inspired by the popular concern about childhood, which I think is exemplified here by this British government review from 2011. So it's called Letting Children Be Children, a review of the commercialisation and sexualisation of childhood. So it's assuming two things: that children are becoming commercialised and sexualised, and it sort of envisages that there is somehow an ideal childhood, but it suggests that instead children are being pressured to grow up too soon. Sexy or fashionable dress is often seen as a contributory factor in this commercialising, sexualising process, something which, as we can see in the quote here, is done to girls. But there is actually little research with young girls to examine whether any of these concerns are actually well founded. To understand how children are perceived and written about and discussed in the ways that they are, you have to think about the way in which childhood is socially constructed. So the idea that children are somehow inherently innocent, unable to understand things and need to be protected from the adult world, is something which is developed in British society over time. Even the Bailey Review recognised that the current notion of childhood innocence is a romantic idealisation. So within contemporary life, children are thought particularly vulnerable. We've got these sort of two main contradictory discourses. So we've got this idea of children as vulnerable. So there are moral panics about the fact that they are seen as at risk. So they're vulnerable. There have been moral panics about risks from paedophiles, for example, video games, social media, and so on. And yet, paradoxically, at the same time as having these worries and, thinking that modern life, adult world is impinging on this childhood, children are also seen as citizens, as people who have rights of their own. So here, for example, we've got this poster from the UN about the rights of children. So they're seen as citizens who have rights of their own. They're individuals, and also that they're seen as consumers. So the world of commerce around them addresses them as if they are consumers in their own right. So we've got these sorts of two contradictions at play at this moment. Now, if we want to think about, so we have this background of these different ways of thinking about childhood. Well, who has actually written about the things that might help us to unpick some of that? And of course, there's the whole sociology of childhood, which has been evolving throughout the sort of late 20th and early 21st centuries, in which children are increasingly viewed as agents, as having their own ability to make decisions, self-determination, to reflect on their own actions, to understand and participate in the world. And so there is increasingly research with children, some of those, a couple of these referenced here. So these are useful for speaking about how children are in the world, but specifically about fashion, we look to the field of fashion, and what we see is there's this growth of empirical work that looks at the interaction, particularly between women and their clothes, and how clothes enable people to construct identities, to think about themselves as people. So what did I decide to do? Well, I researched with 32 predominantly white middle-class girls aged between 8 to 11 years old in the south of England. And, you know, I specifically chose this group because that's the people that the most of the concern is focused around. So I chose to use a mix of qualitative methods to create this multifaceted picture. I wanted to capture that sort of richness of the interaction between girls and the materiality of dress. So what methods did I choose? Well, I conducted some focus groups because I wanted to capture that idea of fashion as a shared phenomenon, an intersubjective practice. And groups gave a sense of how fashion is debated, negotiated, and how an agreement is reached about what fashion is and what is actually in fashion at any one moment. These were conducted with between 3 and 9 participants. They discussed fashion and clothes with only the most occasional prompting from me. In fact, it was amazing to see, like the touch paper, stand back. They just got so involved in these discussions. I barely had to contribute at all. And, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to redress the power dynamic just a little bit so that I'm not the kind of expert. They are the ones that were controlling where the conversation went in terms of fashion and using their own vocabulary. I then asked them to take photographs. So we did participant photography. I asked them to take photographs of their favourite clothes and outfits because I wanted to focus on that material element, the objects of clothing as material evidence, and to look at the relationship between those objects and the bodies that wear them. So in order to do that, I also conducted interviews in which, so these were semi-structured interviews where participants chose which of the photographs they wanted to show me, and then I asked them questions in turn about the clothes, how they looked, how they felt, when and how they were worn, in order to explore that interaction between the material object and the body that wears it. What did I find out? Okay, one of the themes from the findings was around girls negotiating femininity. So girls engaged with fashion, almost all of them were interested in fashion, and they understood its relationship to becoming heterosexually attractive, or as they called it, girly. So they talked about things like liking pink, wearing fashionable short shorts or short skirts. They talked about wearing makeup, and there was lots of worrying about getting your clothes dirty. But for some of the girls, even a hyper-heterosexualised femininity could actually be a source of pleasure and give a real feeling of agency. And one of the girls talked about wearing her party frock and her friend Jack saying, "Wow," when he saw her. And clearly she was, feeling like that was really pleasurable to get that kind of response. But importantly, whilst they did engage sometimes with becoming girly, they noted that the line between being appropriately girly and showing too much had to be very carefully negotiated. So they talked about not wanting to look over the top, and this was watched and navigated carefully by others and themselves, as they talked about who showed too much and the problems with showing too much. In other words, they're already aware of cultural expectations of femininity to be sexy, but not too sexy. Now, there were different gendered performances that were very much context specific. And what would happen is that girls would actually code switch using dress. So code switch is from using this notion that comes from sort of linguistics, where people change the way that they use language in order to explore different parts of their identity. And here, the code switching is between different forms of gendered performance. So, gender performances were understood as context specific, as I say. For example, we've got these. So this is one of the photographs that Emma took of what she called her raggedy trousers. So unlike the girly clothes, these are trousers which are ripped and torn. Not to worry, she didn't worry about getting them dirty, because through these trousers, she talked about being quite outdoorsy, really. And so through that, through these clothes, she could become the sort of outdoorsy person who went out walking her dog, who went on bike rides, and so on. And yet, whilst wearing this sort of outfit, she said, that was what she felt comfortable in, and she definitely didn't like wearing dresses. However, she did also take a photograph of this outfit, a white chiffon dress with satiny strips coming down the skirt. The bodice has got all sorts of sparkly bits on it and sequins, and it's paired with a little fur bolero, and this is worn to family wedding and to a number of other special occasions. So she said she didn't like wearing dresses, but she would wear one to a special occasion. Her comment as she talked about this particular outfit was, "I won't try to get my way out of wearing one. When I think I need to wear one, I'll wear one." In other words, in certain contexts, it was expected by adults that you did wear certain clothes, and she was aware of that expectation and would perform the kind of gender, she put on the right gender performance for that particular context. So in certain contexts, it was expected by adults that you showed off, such as weddings, school discos and parties. And the creation of one type of identity does not prevent the construction of a different identity, depending on the demands of the context. And, so girls were not fixed in their performances. They code switch back and forth through various identities. In a discussion about the school disco, which is obviously one of these times in which that kind of more over-the-top kind of femininity was expected. So they were talking about the school disco in focus group 3, and Abigail said, "It's the time where, you're with everyone in school, where teachers don't care what happens." Ellen responds, "It's time you got to wear whatever you wanted." Mia, "And kiss if you wanted." Ellen, "And my mum wouldn't care what I wore then on the school disco. You're allowed to wear what you want, even if it's inappropriate, too grown up for you." So not only is there this awareness of different gendered performances according to context, here we have this understanding of aged gender performance as context specific. So at the school disco, you can age up, you can wear something that's too grown up for you, but it's just for that particular circumstance. So they're aware of sexual generationing and the position of children as too young to be sexual. They could switch then between these differently aged and gendered performances. Now, the second strand of findings I want to look at is in negotiating fashion, family and friends. So fashion was negotiated between the girls. Fashion about, what's in fashion at the moment, what they talked a lot about things they liked, but also things that they didn't like. and said, well, no, that's in fashion, but we don't like that at the moment. There was also talk of individuality and self-expression. So they talked about expressing your individuality. You may wear something fashionable, but you can still be your own person. You can make it your own. So it's not just simply a blind following of fashion's dictates. You can imbue it with your individuality and wear it in a particular way that expresses you. There was also an awareness of financial constraints. Don't think that you can just go out there and buy anything, that you can consume any old fashion. So, for example, when I asked Georgia about whether she was allowed to go out and spend her clothes allowance, initially she said, yep. And I said, and choose whatever you like. Yes, because I'm getting £62 because I saw one of those biscuit dogs I've got that does all those commands. So here's an advert for the biscuit dog, big fluffy thing, does, claps, if you clap your hands it does something. So what she's done is she has sold that in order to make some money. And I said, so you're just allowed to go and buy whatever you like with that? No, my mum won't give me £62 because I'll go out and spend it on rubbish. And Jessica says, that's what my mum said. So there was, there's talk about knowing that you can't just spend and spend. You've got to kind of talk to your parents. They talk about the price of clothes and what would be considered too expensive and so on. So they know it's not just unlimited consumption. Clothes were also used to display family. This is taken from Finch, who discusses how people use them, things like ornaments, gifts they've been given, things around the house to express family and to display family to others. And I would argue that children did this with their clothes too. So, for example, in this photograph that Lucy took of these high-heeled shoes, the initial assumption might be, oh, she took a photo because they're high heels, they're for showing off and looking older than you are. But actually, when I talked to her about, she said they were special. Well, trying to unpick, so what was special about them? And actually, from what she was saying about it, a lot of it was also to do with the fact that her mum bought them for her. Her mum knew how much, she'd seen them, she knew how much she loved them, and even though she was going to grow out of them quickly and they were expensive, her mum still bought them as a present for her. And so it's partly about, wearing them was about showing, my mum's amazing and she knows the sort of things I like, and she, because she loves me, she buys these things. And so you wear them to show, and I love my mum too. And clothes are also used to display friendship. So, we assume somehow that peer dressing is about pressure to wear exactly what other people are wearing. But sometimes it was felt not as this pressure, but as a joy to wear what your friends are wearing. So, for example, this is Melissa's friend, Chloe. She took a picture of her denim shorts. And when I was interviewing Melissa about clothes, about what to wear, and we touched on these denim shorts. So Melissa, who's 8, said, we all go around to each other's houses before the disco. We wear the same things. Like this year we're all wearing denim shorts and then whatever t-shirt we like and pumps. And we just think it's quite cool because we're all best friends and then we're walking around together and wearing the same stuff. So here she gets pleasure from showing to others, see, we're our group of friends, that we're friends because we are wearing this same item of clothing. We're displaying that friendship to those around us. And then the third and final strand I want to look at is the negotiating age and temporality. So I mean, my argument would be that I think our experiences of clothes enable us to understand the passing of time, and because they give us sort of physical material feedback and allow us to think through different selves. They help us to understand the aging process. So for girls, that was done in a number of ways. So participants distance themselves from babyish clothes. And that was, aging up away from those babyish clothes. But it also, they thought about who they were now in relation to trying on clothes that were too small for them. So that kind of, so they experienced this sort of growing out of clothes as both a fear of losing identity. You allowed it to think about who you were in the past, but also the worry that that past might be lost, the you that you were that was so great. So, for example, here we've got this outfit that Georgia took a photograph of. And in fact, she didn't just take one. She took a whole, something like 27 photographs, all of this same, either the whole outfit or parts of the outfit. Clearly, this was her absolute favourite. It had been the perfect fit. You know, she talked about such joy of wearing this outfit. It was a perfect fit not just on the body, but a perfect fit between the inner and outer person. And, you know, she spoke with such joy and pleasure about having worn this and it being her and how, you know, that was important and how wonderful that had felt. But it was beginning to get tight. So there was this sort of fear of losing that identity. And it means that children this age are constantly reviewing an reassessment of who they are right now. So that's sort of about the past and then the fear of losing that identity. But there was also a sort of sense of going forward. So clothes acted as transitional objects to future identities. So symbolically, they allowed the movement from one identity state to another, from preteen to teen. So for example, here we've got Lucy's photograph of a crop top, which she said was a crop top for next year, and they're my pants. So she was only allowed to wear it in bed now, but she talked about how she would wear it next year when she needed one. And there was talk in other groups about this, the sort of notion that you envisage the boobs that you're going to have to fill it. You'll become that person through wearing those clothes. So there's a projection into the future, simultaneously also then allowed a thinking through of the present. Again, we have this sort of back and forth relationship. Here it's, I imagine who I will be when I've got the breasts to fill this crop top. But then that also reminded her of the lack of breasts now, of the age she was at this moment. So my conclusion then. Girls negotiated. They negotiated discourses of fashion, childhood and femininity through their clothes. And in discussions about what to wear, both with friends and with family. Clothes enabled them to display both their friendships and their kinships. They can code switch between different aged gendered identities. They don't feel themselves as sort of fixed. They could move through these identities and move back and forth between them. So girls' understanding of their age is through the interrelationship between the past, the present, and the future, which can be experienced via their clothes. And here are some of the amazing sources of research that I used to put together this presentation.